In this video, we are going to go over how to integrate intelligent fixtures or DMX moving heads into Vixen. We will walk through the process of configuring a color wheel fixture in Vixen. Vixen's support for intelligent fixtures is based on giving Vixen detailed knowledge about your hardware. To perform this data entry, you are going to need the user manual for your fixture that lists the functions your fixture supports and what channels are associated with those functions. Getting started, we want to select the Setup Display, then select Intelligent Fixture and the Add Elements plus button. This brings up the Intelligent Fixture Wizard. On the Select Profile Wizard page, we need to enter metadata about the fixture. For the profile name, normally one would use the model name, but I'm going to name this profile Example. This page can also be used to create fixtures from existing fixture profiles on the system. You would select this radio button here to go down that path. Selecting Next brings us to the Edit Functions page. This page defines all the functions on the fixture. To give a better understanding of what this page is all about, let's advance to the next page. The Edit Channels page is the most important page for defining the fixture. On this page, we add channels and associate those channels with fixture functions. For this color wheel fixture, I'm going to use the 14 channel mode, so I'm going to add 14 channels. The channels default to an ignore state with a function of none. We now need to go back to the previous wizard page to define and configure our functions. We need to methodically go through our user manual and define our fixture functions. Vixen has predefined the shells of some of the more common functions to speed up this data entry. Let's take a minute to talk about the functions grid. The first column is the function name. This column is free-form text. You are free to rename functions to match your user manual. The type column defines the type of the function. We'll walk through examples of most of these types. The Preview Legend column allows for functions to show their current DMX value in the display preview. This feature is intended to give feedback for functions that cannot be represented graphically. It is recommended to use a single unique character for the function legend. Here we can see the Preview Legend in action in the Vixen display preview. The G is the legend for the gobo function, and the 20 is the current DMX value of the selected gobo. The tag column is what Vixen looks at to know the purpose of the function. Vixen uses the tag to support the preview, effects, and automating certain functions to make sequencing easier. As you can see, there are different available tags for range functions versus index functions. Most likely you won't need to modify the tags if you use these pre-populated functions. Use cases where you might need to assign a tag is if your fixture had more than one gobo wheel or perhaps more than one prism. In the next part of the video, I'm going to walk through my user manual and configure all of the functions for my fixture. The first couple of functions we are going to configure are the pan and tilt. Note that even though there are 4 channels defined in the user manual, Vixen only needs 2 functions, pan and tilt. Vixen will handle converting the angles into a coarse channel and a fine channel. So my fixture has a pan range of movement of 540 degrees. So I'm going to change the stop position to 540. My fixture has a tilt range of movement of 270 degrees. However, the fixture starts out pointing down at a 45 degree angle. So I'm going to set the start position to 45 and the stop position to 315. These start and stop positions are critical to making the Vixen preview match the position and movement of your real hardware. Next up, we're going to configure the color wheel function. Looking at my user manual, my fixture defines states for when the wheel is between 2 of the colors. Also note at the bottom are values for spinning the color wheel in both directions. So I've typed in the first 3 colors of my color wheel and the DMX start and end values for those entries. I'm going to select the button here to pick the colors associated with the entry. This second entry is for when the wheel is between the white and the red in the color wheel. So here I want to select half stop, and Vixen fills in the two corresponding colors. So I've entered in most of the data for the colors in my color wheel, but if we scroll to the bottom, there's some entries we need to talk about. CTB and UV are not colors Vixen can represent with RGB. Vixen is going to use all of the colors in this color wheel to define a color property for the fixture. The color property defines the discrete colors that are available to effects. We need to exclude these color entries that cannot be visualized in the preview from the color property. There are two ways to achieve this. One way is just to omit them from this color wheel definition. The other way is to select this exclude color property checkbox. Note, if you select the exclude checkbox, these entries will not clutter the color property of the fixture, but will be available for selection by name using a specific fixture effect. These last few entries define ranges that pick a particular color or spin the color wheel. For these entries, we want to select Use Curve. This lets Vixen know that it's best to represent these entries with a curve in effects. It also lets Vixen know that these entries apply to the Spin color wheel effect. Finally, this Stop color wheel option would stop the color wheel from spinning if it was on one of these other two options. So for this, we just want to exclude it from the color property. The next function in my Fixtures user manual is the gobo wheel. To the right are the gobo wheel shapes. Another one of the Vixen predefined functions is the gobo wheel. This is the first index type function we will be populating. Note the function has a tag of gobo. I've typed in all of the gobo entries. I did deviate slightly from the user manual as I gave each entry a descriptive name. As you saw earlier, my user manual contained images of the gobo shapes. I copied these images into 100 by 100 pixel PNG files. I am going to use the import button to pull these images into Vixen. Now that the images are in Vixen, I can select one for each gobo entry. These gobo images are optional. If they are populated, the selected image is shown on the sequencing timeline of the gobo effect. Here is an example of the gobo effect on the sequencing timeline. Scrolling down to the bottom are two entries for spinning the gobo wheel. The value in the specified range determines the rotation speed. We want to select Use Curve for these options so they are controlled by a curve in the effects. The next two functions in my user manual deal with a prism. The first function is almost like a shutter in that it applies or does not apply the prism. The second index function controls the position or rotation of the prism. Vixen contains predefined functions for the prism. We just need to fill in the details. For the first function, I've selected the open-close prism predefined function. Note this function has a tag of open-close prism. This tag allows Vixen to automate applying or opening the prism when the prism effect is selected in a sequence. I have typed in the two index ranges for the prism. Note I have applied tags to the open value and the close value to support the automation. For the second function, we select the predefined prism function. Note this function has a tag of prism so that it can be identified by the prism effect. I have typed in the 4 index values for the prism and their respective DMX ranges. Note, all the index values have been tagged with the prism tag so that they are recognized and included in the prism effect. Also note, since 3 of the index values define ranges, I've selected the Use Curve option. The next function in the user manual is shutter and strobing. There is a predefined shutter function. Note it has the shutter tag applied so that the shutter can be automated to open when lighting effects are applied. I have typed in all of my shutter and strobing index values. Note the shutter open entry has a tag of shutter open, and the shutter closed entry has a tag of shutter closed. These tags allow Vixen to automate opening and closing the shutter when lighting effects are applied. Also note several of the index entries are tagged with a strobe tag. These entries will be recognized and available to the strobe effect. The next function in the user manual is the dimmer. Note, even though the function is split over 2 channels, we only need 1 function. Vixen will take care of splitting the value into 2 8-bit pieces. There is a predefined dimmer function in Vixen with no additional data entry required. Note the function has a tag of dim to support Vixen extracting the light intensity from lighting effects and automating the value of the dimmer. The next function in the user manual is a frost filter. There is a predefined frost function with no additional data entry required. Note the function has a tag of frost so that the function is recognized by the frost effect. The next function in the user manual is the pan tilt movement speed. This is the first function in the user manual that is not covered by a predefined function. We will need to create a new function. So we will add a new function, name it pan and tilt movement speed. The type is already set to range. The last function in the user manual is named special functions for configuring the hardware. This is another case where we will need to add a new index function. I've typed in all of the special function entries. At this point, we have made a pass through our user manual and we defined all of our functions. We are ready to move on to the next wizard page and map those functions to channels. At this point, we want to make another pass through our user manual and associate the functions with channels. The first function in the user manual is the pan, and we have 2 channels of pan. I tacked on coarse and fine to the channel names to make them unique. I have entered in all of my channels and associated them with functions. At this point, we are ready to advance to the next wizard page. One other note on editing channels. Pan and tilt movement speed is an example of a function you might omit from Vixen. The speed of movement can be controlled by the Vixen effects using curves. To omit a function from Vixen, we would set the function associated with the channel to none. A function of none is ignored by Vixen. The channel needs to remain in the fixture profile definition to make patching straightforward. Now let's select Next to advance to the next wizard page. This page confirms the color support selected by Vixen. This page analyzes the channels to determine the default color support. No input is usually needed on this page. Selecting Next takes us to the automation page. Vixen analyzes the channels and functions selected for the fixture to determine which types of automation are applicable. Only applicable automation options will be enabled and selected by default. No input is usually needed on this page. Selecting Next takes us to the dimming curves page. This page allows us to apply dimming curves to the color channels. The default is to not add a dimming curve. You might consider adding one if you wanted to restrict the maximum intensity of the light output. If this was a color mixing fixture, the option to add dimming curves to each color channel would be enabled. Selecting the Setup Dimming Curve button lets us define the dimming curve for the fixture. So we can add a dimming curve that will limit the fixture to 70% of the output. Selecting Next takes us to the grouping page. This page configures how many fixtures the wizard will generate. It also configures the fixture element names and group name. Selecting the plus button will increment the number of fixtures the wizard will create. Selecting the Next button takes us to the summary page that shows all of the selected options for the fixtures. Finally, selecting the Finish button will create the fixtures and save the fixture profile. Clicking on one of the fixtures, we can examine what was created. A color property and an intelligent fixture property were created and associated with the fixture. Clicking on the gear button, we can see that an example color set was created, and it contains all of the colors from the color wheel. Clicking on the gear button of the intelligent fixture property, we see all the channels and functions that we entered in the wizard. Selecting the 4 fixtures on the left and a DMX controller on the right, and selecting the Patch Elements button, Vixen connects all the channels to the controller. The Intelligent Fixture Wizard saved a profile for the fixture in the directory shown. This profile can be used to create additional fixtures with the wizard. Note, if the profile is changed in the wizard, those changes do not update existing fixture elements. Existing fixture definitions are stored with the fixture element in the Intelligent Fixture property. This completes the demo of the Intelligent Fixture Wizard. See the online help for additional information. Also, check out our videos for adding intelligent fixtures to the preview and fixture-specific effects.